Hey, it's Stu, and this is going to be a book review video with a little bit of um, a little tiny haul. It was a bright, sunny day. I read outside a lot today. I walked outside a lot today, and I visited several little free libraries where I mostly unhauled all but like 6 books. I'm just going to go over the few that I chose from little free libraries and all of the books that I've read. So mostly this is a catch up on the TBR, which is books with trees on the cover, of which I've read 3 of the 5 I selected. I am listening to Harper Lee's Go See a Watchman. I'm about a third of the way through. Took me a little while to get into it, but I am, so I'm staying committed to the listen, even though it would take me much longer than reading this book. Maybe I'll talk more about that later. I'm not going to start with the books with trees on the cover. I do want to talk about these 2 books first, which were the end of summer reading. This one I started listening to while away in summer, while abroad, and it's a very, very long and a pretty intense listen. So I was able to get it finished this week. And then this one came up, it was one of those super popular, especially summer read ones, and it came off hold, and I had to make the choice. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So just really quickly, I've talked about this book before. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a nonfiction writer. He has a craft of writing. It was interesting to see how well that moved from the nonfiction space into the fiction space. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed listening to this book, not because the content is enjoyable. However, I do feel like there's some enjoyment and entertainment to the hero's journey. And this is definitely a hero's journey book. This is a deep exploration of the humans, the enslaved humans, including our hero and all of his loved ones during our dark, dark history of chattel slavery, specifically in the United States. I personally liked the magical elements. I thought they addressed some mythology and lore that I think is really a central part of many and most cultures. There's some kind of mythology or lore, and I think they addressed it a little, and I think also always make room for magic. I can see how someone would criticize this book because of the magic, because the reality of the enslaved people is so harsh and so terrifying that these little magical moments maybe some people could criticize for several reasons. I wasn't one. I liked the magic. I thought this was a fantastic book, and I will look for a friend to give this book to, as it is still in nearly mint condition. These endings got a little worn down while I carried it around, but hardback book. Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I finished this book. This book was okay. I could have criticisms, but I don't even think this book is necessarily even worth my time in criticizing. Not that Taylor Jenkins Reid didn't do. She's a writer of her craft. She knows her craft. She does well inside of the genre that she writes in, and I don't regret having read this or the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I also, shout out to the queer representation that TJR puts in books. And just romance, I already said, not my thing. Celebrity, not my thing. Like, looking at celebrity and the lives of celebrity, it's not really an interesting topic for me. So I think this, I unhauled 2 other Taylor Jenkins Reid books. I think she's a popular author for other people, and I probably wouldn't pick another one of hers up. Sans like, sitting in some place and it's there and I have time to read it. She doesn't I respect her writing craft. I can say that. It's just not for me. These are the 3 books with trees on the cover. I cannot say as much of their respect for the writing craft of Meg Schaefer in The Lost Story. The Lost Story promoted itself to be like a retelling of Narnia. I found it distractingly poorly written. The dialogue of the characters reminded me of like Percy Jackson, which is middle grade, not adult, and these characters are 30. And I found that distracting, if not annoying. I think there might be some reason why she did that, to kind of align with the memory of Narnia, like the nostalgia of Narnia. But I even found the like reference to Narnia and the Wizard of Oz. I thought that this book was really, really relying on that reference point and the nostalgia and not doing its own work. I'm not a romance gal. I think this is better, maybe better marketed as a romantasy and maybe young adult romantasy. And I would have given more grace because the romance piece was sweet and cute. And again, always going to give a shout out to queer representation in stories of every genre. Just kind of struggled. I did get all the way to the end, hoping that there was some redeeming thought, and all the way through. The writing just didn't hit it for me. So I decided to read right after that, but then it took me a long time to read it. Tex and Molly in the Afterlife by Richard Grant. This had all the references also to Narnia, Douglas Adams, Dune, all of the fantasy sci-fi greats that probably are marketing maybe even the same readership that this book was trying to market. However, this was just way more well done, sophisticated and complex story that used those references and the homage to make homage, but then built its own structures. And I do like books that deal with the afterlife. I think that's a fantastic fantasy exploration. And I found this writer, I think somebody else said this as well, is really sort of Tom Robbins-esque. There was a lot of nostalgia, and also, as this came out in the 90s, there's plenty of, hippie appropriation of cultures. The way in which Native Americans are talked about in this book is, one could problematize for sure. The name of the tribe, at least, is mentioned. However, there's some pieces when I don't know if it's, informed satire. I think not. Also the male gaze. Yeah, I'm so over the male gaze. And I know this is the 90s and I have to give a little bit more grace and would, for books, say printed in the 90s, because everyone, I was in university learning about male gaze. So it's not like it wasn't known. It's just by now, everyone knows better. And it's annoying to me. Overall, though, even those things being said, this is a fantastic book. I have someone I want to give this book to. It was a great read. It was fun. It's what I needed to sort of pull me back into fantasy as an option. And sort of even absurdity. Because if you recall in my last review video, I was like, maybe life is just too absurd. I think the last thing I'll say about this book is that this is, environmental issues and people finding their own ways to make a difference against what is the, sort of the mechanism of power and control that exploits nature, the environment, and people. The more things change, the more they stay the same. 1998. Recommend this book for Douglas Adams fans for sure. Next, I'm going to talk about these 3 books together because all of them in some way address SA. This is a psychological thriller mystery. Tana French's writing is good for that genre. I was able to mostly stay in this story, but I found myself abrogated from the very beginning, as this book is It was published in the, I think the early 2000s, 2007. And right off at the beginning, we get this comparison to a beautiful woman as something that doesn't need to happen. Like, it didn't need to be there. And it sets the scene for me. It sets a tone that sort of like the romanticized objectification of women's bodies and the importance of their being beautiful is tone setting when we are going to deal with missing, maybe highly endangered children in woods. Not necessary. We then go on to see that there's some play, and I think this book for me was rooted in all kinds of chauvinistic misogyny. And the last thing I'll say is, like, twists are fine. It held the mystery genre quite well. I can see why it might have won awards. But when we get to the end, and there's like this ridiculous scene, so spoiler alert, there's this ridiculous scene where they haven't actually verified the age of the primary suspect, and they've been questioning her, albeit under caution. And then the primary suspect says, you're going to need to get my parents here. And the lead detective is like, no, she told me I was 18. And somebody says, oh, so many people have been put in jail because of that lie. And I was like, what? Like, what? And I'm going to tell you why that's, like, how that continued to land and be worked out. Because I then read Trust Exercise by Susan Choi. So if you haven't read this book, don't listen to this part that I'm going to talk about this, because maybe what this book is about is part of your discovery in it, or maybe listening will help you get to that place, because the first part of this book I almost DNF'd, like many people I think had. The final thing, I didn't also like the main male characters. His flaws were something that were interesting only for part of the book, and the fact that of the arc, he never grew, and he was just like the quintessential douchey dude in the end. Like, yeah, nah. Okay. The beginning of this book starts with sophomores, so 14, 15-year-old children in a performing arts school, and we spend a lot of time with them, and they're very much sophomores. And I'm like, I don't want to hang out in a performing arts school with sophomores. I'm not a gleek. Like, wasn't really compelling. I wouldn't want to hang out with myself and my own friends from sophomore year. And that's the whole first part of the book. And there are some things going on, of course, and this is the kind of book where you get to the second part and you're like, oh, I have to go back and pay attention and maybe even reread the first part. Part of me, when I was reading it, was like, oh, this is going to be like universality. Like, I'm just not, it's too experimental in some way, or it's just not landing right now, but there are things there and I can tell. So you get to the second part and you realize, oh, okay, I was kind of clued into a lot of the things that were alluded to by this author. Great writing style, by the way. Ultimately, I think also what was happening is that I was incredibly triggered by coercive essay. And that's what this book explores, is most especially coercive essay, and how it feels to be the young, impressionable people who are experiencing it and not knowing how to process it, and then trying to process it later in adult life, and then not being believed, even though the adults who were around during the time knew what time it was, but still choose to keep up the facade and say shit like, plenty of people are in jail because they believed the lie that she was 18. Okay, right. So it's a great book. I'm going to let it back into the space, because it is National Book Award time. This author will be known to people. She's Susan Choi's Flashlight is up for Booker and National Book Award. So Susan Choi's on people's lips, and maybe if they tried to read this before and it didn't land well, they read it again and give it another chance. Because I could see that happening as well. Or they DNF'd it in that first part because they're like, I don't want to hang out with sophomores in acting class, and poorly executed acting class. It's going out, but I'm saying all that to say I want to read this book in the future. That leads me to this, and it's a similar topic, right? I want to say again, this is the first book I've read in young adult with a Muslim female protagonist. What in the actual, I read a lot, I have read a lot, and how can that even be true? Reminds me, I have to make space. I have to go out and find representation in books, because it's not just sort of naturally going to land on my lap. You have to be deliberate about that. Now, this did land on my lap. I mean, I found it at Little Free Library about a year ago. And promised myself to read it quickly. I broke that promise, but I'm reading it now, and it's going back out into the ether because, yeah, representation matters. Trauma trigger for sure. This book covers SA, microaggressions, and some hard stuff. It's confronting from a teenage lens, but if you know, you know, and that's all I can say about some of the amount of things that this character just sort of needs to tolerate as she tries to, be a teenager and be a not perfect person, because nobody's a perfect person, and discover herself and crushes and her religious identity, etc. Yeah. I mean, fun, fast, poignant read. I can't believe I got to this today, and I read this all but the last 10 pages. The plot does matter in this book, so I'm excited to figure out how it ends. And this leads me to say that this book is a really great sort of marriage of really decently developed characters with sparse writing and plot. It's really fast paced. The chapters are short. We're going through sort of different points of view, or looking at 3 different lives that are intersected through the third person, and choices that are made, and how people kind of end up being pawns, I think is a way to say it, even in pursuit of their own dreams, and maybe because of, which feels a little bit, well, yeah, it's jaded, but it is. I was like, this is not, I'm going to see how this ends, but it's not a feel-good read. It is a good read. And I also really recommend A Burning by Megha Majumdar. And for sure, if I end up reading her other book, this author is the craft of this author I appreciate. So, what's next? This is another summer read. I thought it's quirky, it's contemporary, and I think that could be a good sort of reset from these really deep, the confronting of a lot of SA, and even the topics in this, which are sometimes even your dreams are the things that bring you down. It's one of the ways to see that book. So Julie Chan is dead. I know there's obviously a death. So there's going to be some grief, but this is really going to be a social commentary and about social media. And I think it's very contemporary. I think it's a little weird and quirky, and it was on summer reading, so I think it just got bumped till now, and I'm kind of happy to shuffle it in because Sing Unburied Sing and What Is What are kind of what's next on the National Book Award list, and it just felt like a lot of heavy reading, so we'll see. This is where I'm going next. The next sort of what I want to read outdoor and maybe listen to, I have a long drive coming up, so is this. I pulled out some fantasy. I read 2 fantasy books. I'd quite like to get into this fantasy again. I've had this much longer than I wanted to, and that's Bright Storm by George Ermos. Lies. That's who illustrated it. This is Vashti Hardy, and this is book 1. Yeah, I think this could be something that's just nice to be out in the sun. This is a young adult, so it's going to go quickly. It's got some great illustrations, and that's why I would actually like to be in the physical copy of the book. And if I have any sunny days, I'd like to be, reading something like this that's fantasy. I think it's going to feel less heavy than the books that I just read. That's my anticipation, at least, and magical. If not, I'll give it there. It's like a 6-hour listen, on my trip. So yeah, the beginning of the haul, and why I want to bring it up is so I hauled this book today. I got this out of a little free library. I had hauled another Allie Smith, which was Hotel. I had planned to read it last June. I didn't get to it. That's okay. I know that she writes these season, novels, and wasn't it serendipitous to find Autumn? So I found both the digital and audio versions, and this one looks quite accessible, the font as well, especially out in the sunshine. So this could be a nice hybrid read, and I do kind of plan to, I want to read this in the next few weeks. So this is going on TBR, and I think I'll just do a mood read for this one, especially if these topics, these National Book Award writing winner topics get a little too heavy. I'm just looking at the back. I'm like, maybe I'm saying this is light, and it's actually not. It's a luminous meditation on the meaning of richness and harvest and worth. Yeah, and it's also the first installment of the season book. So all good, all good, all good. Yeah, TBR. The last 4 hauls. Yeah, I actually even really like this edition. It's not the one that I had. It is sort of the era of my reread. And this came to me, and it's time to reread it. I'm not exactly sure when, but I'm glad to have it available and for me to grab and do a reread. This I wasn't sure about. It's a fun, it's like the Couch on Fire rental house. I think it's about, marriage, and I don't know if that's my favorite topic. I don't know if I'm gonna mostly roll my eyes at this book, but it's almost like a novella, and it's signed. And so I have certainly started curating a label of my signed books so that I can do that as a TBR. So I thought this would kind of be a fun and quirky one to put on that. And well, Lisa Coe and Elif Boutman gave it some props, so we shall see. Another classic is The Native Son. It's a bit of a chunker. I didn't know, again, do I really want to have classics on my shelf? Yes or no? Like, it almost feels good to have some classics on a curated shelf. And again, if I don't get to it, this came from a little free library. It'll go back to a little free library. I think what was in my mind is that this, I think, was the first, it was the first Black man author to have a book of the month. And I have, like, in my mind, I think that I'm going to do a book of the month sort of TBR and get, I have quite a bit of book of the month books that I've hauled through little free libraries that I might just kind of pull 3 or 4 together, and then this would fit nicely on it. The last one, it's because it was a National Book Award finalist. This was in the 1990s. And this is The Bird Artist by Howard Norman. He's written more contemporary things. He was a finalist 2 times for the National Book Award in the 80s and then in the 90s. I have a lot of 90s literature on my shelf, so I got it home and I thought, well, if I read it in this reading for National Book Award authors, then and our winners and our finalists, then great. But if not, I'm really happy to just go ahead and let this go. And what I did is I just put on my For Future, one of his more contemporary books, because this doesn't exist, the audio or the visual in Libby. So if I don't get to actually reading the physical copy of this in the next couple of weeks, it's an on haul. Hopefully somebody else will grab it for the same reason I did. I know exactly where I got it. I can just go put it back where I got it and hope that someone will come along and read it. I was glad for the intro to this author. I may or may not like a Canadian author, and has written several works. So at least I got introduced to an author, and we'll see if this gets read in the next couple of weeks. If not, that's going to be a clearer, just go ahead and on haul. The end.